Welcome to Daily Meditation with Sangha Live.
So I understand that there's going to be a break in these meetings for August, or at least that's the impression I get from the chat. I hope I'm not spreading misinformation. So today, in this last session of the week, I want to emphasize the theme of I'll close the chat, otherwise I won't be able to concentrate. The theme of generosity. And yesterday I presented a certain line of insight, saying, well, these worldly winds will hit harder the more the self-sense is rigidly constructed. Actually, it's not only the sense of self that the more it is constructed, the more the worldly winds will hit hard. It's also the sense of the world. But we can focus on the sense of self and saying, well, the more separate, the more one-dimensional, closed, kind of shrunk and strongly defined in a kind of in a way that you can easily grasp to, and it's born out of grasping. The sense of self is the easier it is for the winds of the world to hit hard, and such a sense of self will also create. With such a sense of self, there will be a co-arising of a strong sense of I may win or lose. I want to be praised and not to be blamed. I want to succeed and not to fail, etc., etc. And a lot of the practice in the Dharma has to do with the question, how can we relax the contractedness, the rigidity, the one-dimensionality, the tight nature of the self and the world? That wasn't a great way to say it. The tight construction, the building of a tight self and a tight world. How can we relax that to enable and allow a much looser, a much broader, a much more malleable, a much more flexible, less entangled and kind of pinned down sense of self and world? Now, one thing that really helps with it is that it is more true. I mean, if we will look at the experience of self and even just observe it arising and changing and taking different centers of identification, etc., we will understand it's kind of flexible and malleable by nature, but we don't necessarily experience it as such. There is a tendency to kind of fixate on certain senses of self and with them and around them create kind of sediments, I think you could call that, of things that this sense of self pushes and pulls. And there will be the tendency to perceive the world similarly again and again, not necessarily seeing newness, dimensionality, and the incredible flexibility and non-rigidity of the experience. So we can train ourselves to move from this to that. Generosity may not sound like a way to do that, but that's actually exactly a way to do that. A core kind of idea in the Dharma that your perception and sense of yourself and the world is determined by the actions of your body, your heart, and your speech. And that's true both in the sense of like, how do you read and interpret the shape of what this self is and what the world is? What do you attribute to it? And that is also true in the sense of how rigidly and kind of one-dimensionally it arises for you, and how closed and one-dimensional the world is for you versus how open, flexible, malleable. So the actions of the body, speech, and mind actually influence that, determine that, long-term and short-term. To an extent, of course, to an extent, at least in the short term. The movement of generosity, it's such a kind of simple thing, right? Everyone says, or everyone that speaks the voice of wisdom speaks about generosity. Sounds very trivial. Wait a second, I'm going to look at the chat to see if, all right, good. No complaints about my sound today. I do have some complaints about the sounds of the construction work here, but no one's asking me. And if they would, I wouldn't know to speak their language. So anyway. But the movement of generosity goes very deep in its possibility to loosen and dissolve the kind of default mode construction of itself. The gesture of generosity. It's an opposite to the gesture of grasping or clinging, right? You're basically doing this, spreading your hands out, willingly giving your time, your energy, your attention, your care, your sensitivity, the powers of your heart and mind, sometimes material things. You're actively giving. You can see, very simple to see, it goes against the movement of entanglement, of weaving or taking more around the self, of collecting things that will kind of thicken and tighten this sense of self. It's the opposite movement of that. And we can practice it on so many different levels. And on whatever level we'll practice it, if we will practice it well, freedom will come, unbinding will come, short-term and long-term. And equanimity will come. If someone's going into a meeting, needing to give a presentation or meeting someone or needing to do a job, and the whole line of thinking is around, will I do this well? Will they like me? You know, will I succeed in it or will I fail? that puts you right in the center of the worldly winds. If the line of thinking, really deeply, and when I say thinking now, I don't mean a superficial activity, it's the line of perceiving, it's your poise. If the poise has more to do with how can I help? What can I give? And the more honestly that is asked, the less you're likely to be kind of pushed and pulled by these winds. It doesn't mean that you'll always do well or that you will always succeed in what you want to succeed in. There can still be a desire to do things well, to serve well. However, that's a different thing, or it carries a much lesser burden than the burden of, I want to succeed for myself. It puts you in a much less vulnerable place. It's much easier. And it's more true. It's more true. Again, looking at this perspective of the self, we can see it arises differently in different situations, in different conditions. It's kind of a certain sense, social conditions are there, and a certain self-emergence. Different kind of social conditions are there, a different self-emergence. The story of the self can sound, the story of the self in terms of its past can sound so differently at different times. It's a very flexible phenomena. And there will be a tendency again to kind of sense that there is something here in the core that needs to somehow succeed in this or look good in this or that way, etc. And it's all based on a certain kind of optical illusion. So going in with such a poise puts you in a very unstable place to begin with. Generosity needs to be practiced. You may or may not think about yourself as a generous person, and you may or may not be right. But in a way, it doesn't matter. What matters is the question, do you practice it so that you can see the benefit of it? It is not the default mode, like so many of these things. It just needs to be practiced again and again, practiced by giving, and perhaps sometimes giving a little bit more in terms of like, yeah, that's what I feel comfortable with, and then I train the muscle a little bit. Like if you would do some kind of sport, you would do it until the edge in which you feel okay, and then you push just a little bit to allow the muscle to kind of get a little bit. I think that's how it works. I think the muscle gets torn a little bit, and then it reconstructs itself in a kind of larger shape or a fuller shape. It's the same with the muscle of generosity. So sometimes you need to give and then give a little bit more and actually practice that and make that a, a movement in your life that you don't need to remember an event somewhere in the past. No, you have it from yesterday. You have it from today. It becomes part, and maybe an important part, and maybe slowly that part replaces other parts of your operating system. Kind of replaces the place of the centrality of self and its search for gain and loss. Not loss, just gain. If possible. Not possible. Anyway. It's worth reflecting on the generosity that you practiced and see how it impacts. Actually notice the results to teach the mind this lesson. Some lessons will be so obvious for the mind. This lesson is not obvious. It needs to be shown. Generosity brings ease, it brings freedom, it brings equanimity. Don't expect yourself to be perfect with regard to generosity. That's probably impossible. You will be jealous at some people. You will, your generosity will be a little bit tainted with a wish to receive something back. All sorts of things will happen. Fine. You know, no practice is perfect. It's a practice. And one last thing about that. So generosity brings freedom and happiness. There's another interesting kind of power to it, especially when it kind of begins to be more fluent for the system. And yeah, that's what I live by. That thing, by the way, that's not what I want to say, but I'll say it. That thing may not be dramatic at all. It may be very gradual. It may change just tiny things, but it's like the underlying tone of everything changes, if that makes sense. It can really happen over time through practice, through different practices, slowly and gradually. The underlying tone of everything changes from a tone of being so concentrated on myself and what I want and my gains and losses, etc., to being kind of built around, centered around generosity. Gradual, gradual. Not a binary, not sudden, and not necessarily dramatic, none of that. And again, there is the art of learning to see that and feel the freedom that comes with it. And actually really appreciating what maybe have changed already over some years, maybe many years. And even playing with the possibility of really intentionally seeing yourself this way. No self-view is correct. You won't have a like finally this is who I am, this is how I am. Even not even for a moment. The world doesn't work this way. You can play, you are anyway playing with your self-view. Very often we do it in a not so helpful way. We can do it in a much more helpful way. Actually perceiving yourself intentionally as having a core of generosity. Of course, that will need to be in relationship to actions and mind states, etc. But that can be another tool in your toolbox to actually invite that perception of self. Imagine yourself in this way, knowing that this is what you're doing and what you're doing it for. It's not a kind of you're not buzzing out, but you're poising yourself in this way as a being of generosity. And the one last thing I wanted to say about it before I said this was, well, generosity will also call forth and will necessitate the development and cultivation of other qualities of heart and mind. If you want to be generous, you need to be energetic. You need to be attuned. You need to be sensitive. You need your powers of mind with you. So it will invite quite deeply the need to cultivate all that long term. And these things, they bring happiness. They bring happiness. That these are the conditions that will lead to long-term welfare, or kind of a sense of well-being and happiness over time. That's what we're going for in the Dharma. The cultivation of beautiful qualities of heart and mind as our resource, in ways our refuge. Generosity will call all that. So it creates a kind of positive feedback loop. Mm-hmm. You will always need to cultivate more because generosity is endless. You will want to give more, and there will be more and more need. That's always going to be the case. All right, let's practice. So, in the practice today, we'll invite a certain relationship with a multiplicity of experience that go in the direction of letting go, and we will incline into a kind of oneness. All right. find a posture that works for you. You can practice this sitting, standing, walking, or lying down. And make sure you're sitting in a way that supports you and that enables and even invites your body to be somewhat open and upright. Check if there is anything that you would like to change so that the posture is even a little bit better. Really caring for the posture. Let yourself feel the balance of the posture. Tuning to the balance of ease, settledness, and uprightness and openness that the posture can express. And embody. Then we can scan the body. First, do that intuitively. Approaching different aspects of the bodily experience and relaxing them. Then systematically, starting from the top of the head, touching and relaxing there. Moving down to the back of the head, the forehead, the eyes, the jaw, the entire face. Then down the throat, the neck, the back of the neck. down the shoulders, the arms and hands, down the spine, touching and relaxing all the way down the spine. Then the right and the left sides of the back, into the tailbone, around it, down the pelvis, down the legs, touching and relaxing. Then you can do another quick and intuitive scan. Although I forgot the chest and belly, so you can go there first. Relaxing them. And then quickly scanning the body again, just to relax whatever tension is left. And from there you can expand your attention to the whole body. And reminding yourself the quality of kindness, of goodwill, that brings you to practice again and again, that is underneath the choice to practice and so many other choices within practice and outside of it. Kindness, goodwill towards yourself and others. You can use some meta phrases if you want. Then you can turn to hearing. And see if you can let your hearing be very broad. Yes, there are sounds from here and there. Can you hear all of it as if at once? So the whole soundscape. Of course, some areas of the soundscape will be more prominent. That's fine. And still, you can have the hearing be very wide. And perhaps you can hear in a very direct way. Meaning that the experience of hearing is more prominent, more central than, oh, that's a sound of a plane coming from there, that's the sound of a car coming from there, that's the sound of a something, a bird coming from there. Never mind what is making the sound or the imagined location of it. This can be there in the background, it's fine, but can you listen to how it sounds? The texture of sounds. Let's stay with it for a minute. The whole soundscape. Habitually, the mind can kind of skip from one sound to another, and that's okay, but now we can invite it to hear more generally. To a field, a sphere of sounds. Notice the quality of the mind when it's doing that. It may be that it has a spacious quality to it. Very alive. And very receptive at the same time. If you want, you can tune to each of these qualities for a second. The aliveness of the mind, the openness of it, the vastness of it. The soundscape, unlike the body, doesn't really present physical boundaries, so the mind can be very expansive. Tuning to the expansion and aliveness of the mind. And then tune to its receptivity. Which is in a way endless because of aversion and for other reasons. It may feel like there are sounds that block the mind, that are too much, etc. But tune to the receptivity of mind. Is there a limit to it? Or is there an intuitive sense that there is room for everything? And with these two qualities, aliveness, openness, and receptivity, find the poise that work for you right now. Find the balance that works for you right now. Tuning the mind. Opening wide to all sounds, allowing them to arise and change and dissolve in the way they do. And the experiences of body can be experienced in this same way. Heard together with the sounds. So inviting the mind, the heart to be open, alive, and receptive, and tuning to that again and again, and in that, sounds and bodily sensations and anything else really is very welcome to show itself as it wants. Rob had this suggestion. Can you listen with your heart? Can the heart be involved in the listening? Listening to sounds, to bodily sensations, to images and thoughts coming and going, to the movements of the heart and mind. And with the listening, with the whole body, tuning to silence as well. Yes, there are sounds, and also silence, stillness. Is it possible to hear that? There is some silence when the sound is gone. Between sounds, both in terms of time and in the sense of space, a sense of silence, stillness between sound. And perhaps somehow below them, underneath them. Take a moment with that, just tuning to the sense of silence, letting it be heard with the heart, with the body. The heart can gently touch into the silence, kind of expand into it. You may notice that it's not really separate from sounds. It's not only between and beneath, but it's inseparable from sound. Here we can tune to silence filling the sounds. They're full of silence, full of stillness. Perhaps you can get a sense of this stillness and silence, touching the body again, maybe surrounding it. The body and the heart are touching into it, expanding into the stillness and silence. So it can naturally expand inwards and outwards. Let's take a couple of minutes here. invite the heart and the body to enjoy silence and stillness. And through that, it naturally deepens and expands. And with this, you can relax the meditative intention. Relax the meditative posture. The mind may want to take a note of whatever was helpful in this meditation. And after doing that, you can invite your eyes to open. Thank you for practicing this way.
Today's podcast is an offering to you from our archive of freely available live daily classes. We make wisdom teachings and meditations as freely available as possible to as many people as wish to practice. You can help ensure we can continue to support a worldwide Sangha by leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts, by sharing this with someone who'd be interested, and by offering a small financial support at sangha.live/donate.